An F-15 will climb faster to 50,000 feet than a Saturn V rocket will. Really a better organizational structure for developing character and leadership than serving in the U.S. military. We built the new high school and football stadium and gave our kids some of the best facilities. And then the next thing that happened is stand by for separation. They tell you to stand by for separation. Now the booster is going to disconnect from the capsule and it's going to start falling and you float out of your seat. And it is truly remarkable.
Welcome to In the Arena. I'm your host, Representative Mindy McAlindon. Joining me today in the arena is Senator Colonel Jim Hendren. He has an amazing political family that he comes from, has a successful political career, and has done so many other things. I think you will really enjoy hearing from him, learning about his military career, learning that he just went into space and became the 777th man to be in space. We're going to learn all about that today. So join me in the arena. Senator, it is great to have you on the program today. Thanks for joining me.
Great to be here, Mindy.
So I am so excited for our conversation, and I know you are because you can already tell we've talked about it. But before you got into politics, before you went into space, you served in the military. Can you tell me just a little bit about your service, why you decided to go into the military, and kind of what that was like a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to, Mindy. It was, I think that was probably outside of marriage and kids, that was one of the biggest decisions I ever made was deciding to join the military. And to be honest with you, I did it on kind of a whim. I was out here working where I'm at today at the company. I had graduated college with a degree in engineering. The Air Force was really looking for engineers at the time to start developing their burgeoning space program. And so they had been contacting my entire senior year in college looking for electrical engineers, but I kind of blew it off because I was working here to build a company. Well, they called me one before they put my file away in August of 1985. They called one last time, the recruiter did, to say, hey, just before I put this away, wanted to see if you wanted to come talk. I drove to Fayetteville, met with the recruiter because it was about 105 degrees, I think, that day here in Gravette. And it was, I was ready to see the world. I was a little disenchanted with what I was doing at the moment. So I went and met the recruiter. He told me all the great things about engineering, but he had those pictures of airplanes behind him on the wall. And I said, that sounds great, but what do you have to do to fly one of those things? And he asked me if my vision was good because that eliminates so many people. And I said, as far as I know. And a month later, I was on my way to San Antonio to basic officer training school and off to pilot training, and spent the next 8 years active duty, getting to live that dream that I'd always thought about it, but I never really thought it was something that was realistic for a kid from Arkansas. The same thing I thought about the space program, and have always had those dreams. But I got to fulfill many of them, so I feel very blessed about that.
That is pretty exciting, and it's interesting to me. I guess I didn't realize that about you. I thought you had gone through school with the intent of joining the Air Force, so I didn't realize that it was kind of a whim. That's kind of fun to hear. So, do you go ahead?
No, that's right. That's right. I wish I could say I now my son is a fighter pilot and he always dreamed of being a fighter pilot. He's got a better story. Me, I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's try it.
But what a great success story, too. I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of a neat story. So the experiences that you had in the military, I've always heard that they're definitely character shaping, but also in terms of just leading businesses and being successful in just whatever you pursue. When I worked at Procter, we highly recruited military personnel because they were just very good at getting those kinds of things done. Do you feel like that really shaped you in terms of your leadership style?
Oh, for sure. At officer training school, you spend the first half learning how to follow, take orders, pay attention to detail, make sure your socks are not just folded correctly, but facing the right direction in the drawer, and all of those things that have a purpose that you don't understand at the time. And then you spend the last half of officer training school learning to be a leader. And it served me well, I think, in many aspects of life. I don't think there's really a better organizational structure for developing character and leadership than serving in the U.S. military. So I was very blessed, and those same lessons have transferred into my business and somewhat into other areas of my life.
So before we jump into politics, tell me a little bit about your business. You have a plastics business, is that correct?
I do. It's here in Gravette. My dad and I started this when I was a senior in college. I'd grown up in one when I was in junior high school and grade school, but my dad had sold it and had spent 5 years while he was in politics and gotten out of the business. But he and I together started this one So I had to have hard conversation. I'd been here about a little less than a year, about 9 months, putting all the equipment in and starting this company. When I came home one day and said, "Hey, guess what I just did? I'm
Oh.
leaving for the Air Force." And so yeah, we started this, and then when I came back in 1992 from active duty, we had about 8 or 10 employees. It was still here, and it was doing okay. And then I've spent the last 35 years, investing and working, and fortunately, it's been growing.
And is it still a family business? Do any of your children work with you in the business?
Not currently. My son-in-law worked with me for several years, but he actually spun off and started his own business with my son, one of my boys, and so we work together. I do have hopes at some point that one of my other kids may come back and get involved in the business. My oldest, who is the fighter pilot, is eligible to retire in about 3 or 4 years, so
Wow.
he might be able to come back and do it. So, but it's primary, and my daughters worked in it over the time. The boys grew up out here learning how to work and sweep the floors and load trucks, and so it's been a family business for a lot of years.
That is wonderful. Well, let's switch over to politics. You have a amazing politically adept family. I can't even. You and I were talking off camera, but the amount of people in your family who have been in politics, the impact that y'all have had in Arkansas is truly amazing. And so it's interesting to me that growing up with that much politics around you, that you decided to go ahead and jump in and run for office. So tell me kind of how that thought process happened.
Well, you're right. I grew up in politics, watching my family, watching my dad in the state senate, watching, of course, my two uncles, Asa and Tim, serve in the legislature and in Congress and in the U.S. Senate. So I was able to observe all that and see all that. And I will tell you, I never aspired to get into the politician business, and that's part of the reason I joined the military and got an engineering degree and began to build a company. But I never ruled it out. And the way I got into it initially, well, I would say this: when I came back to the Air Force, my first political job was the graduate school board, where I spent 15 years. In fact, there were 10 years when I was in the House of Representatives and on the school board at the same time, which made for some long Monday nights after
Oh,
meetings
I
driving
bet.
back to Little Rock. But and I was on the school board because I cared. My head, all four of my kids went to the same school I went to, and my dad went to, and I felt like it was a great school, and I wanted it to continue to be that. And I'm very proud of the work that we did there. We built the new high school and football stadium and gave our kids some of the best facilities that are in Northwest Arkansas, because we had a lot of support from the people out here in Gravette and Bella Vista and Hiawassee. So I spent a lot of time on the Gravette School Board, but after that, while I was doing that, a couple of ladies from the Benton County Republican Committee, some of the tireless workers who really do the work of building a party, came out and to the plant here and asked me if I would consider running against the last Democrat in Benton County, Rayleigh Steele, who was
Wow.
serving in the legislature as a Democrat. And so I said, well, I'm very busy and I've got kids and I got work. But if you'll help me do a lot of the work, then I'll agree to give it a try. So I did. And as I said, I was elected the first time back in 1994. And to give you an idea, Mindy, how things have changed, when I was elected, I was one of 13 Republicans out of the
Oh,
100 in the House. So
wow.
we were a true minority,
Yeah.
and we got to experience what the other parties getting to experience these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that had to be amazing because when you left office, we were a majority. I don't know if we were a super majority yet in the House and Senate, but we were definitely
Well,
in the majorities, right?
well, that's an interesting story. So I was term limited after 3 terms in the House, so I got
Okay.
out and I went back to building my business, and I had a 10-year gap. And I had really no desire to get back in politics, but my good friend Cecile Bledsoe was serving in the
Yes.
Senate, who had
Yeah.
served in the House with me for years. And he called me back in 1999 or so, 2000, and said, or I guess because I ran in 2002, shortly before the 2002 election, and said, Jim, we're getting ready for the first time to have a majority party in Arkansas, and we really need you to be a part of that. Would you consider running for the state senate? Very similar to what the ladies told me 15 years prior in the House. And I told her, I said, well, I can't pass up that opportunity. So when I came down to the Senate, it was the first time. they had already elected a Democrat president pro tem of the Senate. So that was
Okay.
probably one of the first times that the nominee did not get it because the Republicans took control of the Senate.
Oh,
So yeah,
fascinating.
so I saw us go from 13 Republicans in the House to complete domination of both houses, and it was
Mm.
a different world when I went down there. Obviously,
Yeah, I bet it was. And your dad was serving in the House at that time?
my dad, not at that time. After I was in the Senate for
Okay.
I don't know 4 years or so, the House seat came open and he ran. So yeah, my dad was my House member, one of my House members on the other end. So we actually had the opportunity to sponsor some legislation together and do
Uh,
some things.
that is very cool. And then at some point, your uncle was the governor too, right? I mean, like, y'all were dominating Arkansas politics without question.
Well, my last term, or I guess my next to last term, I was the president of the Senate, and Asa was just elected governor.
Okay.
And so it was my job to get my uncle's agenda through the Senate. And so, and of course, I agreed with his agenda, but so that
Yeah.
wasn't my only job. But it was really special to get to work with him because I had watched for so many years the effort he put into building this Republican Party.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back a long ways. He goes back much further. He remembers when it was almost hopeless to be a Republican, and it was because of him and people like him that we were able to have the majority. So to
Yeah.
serve there with him now as the governor and me as the leader of the Senate, that was a special session.
I can only imagine. I have often said to Hope, to your sister, who's Representative Duke, um, I have said, man, Thanksgiving at your house must just be like lively without question. So tell me of the time that you served, what would you be most proud of what you accomplished during your time in the legislature?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I will tell you probably one of the biggest battles, and I think one of the biggest milestones for me was in 1995, my first session. I'm not sure; it may have been 97. Either my first or my second
Mhm.
session. Um, I was reading through some information about the legislative session, and I read a description of partial birth abortion.
Mm.
And I had no idea that that was even a thing. And when I read a description of it, like most people, I was horrified. I'm a pro life individual. And when I saw that that was something that was legal in Arkansas, I was naive enough. I just sent an email to legislative research and said, hey, write me a bill banning partial birth abortion in Arkansas. And you got to realize now, you all take it for granted down there. It's
Yeah.
any pro life bill you want. We had not passed a pro life bill since Roe versus Wade when I filed that bill in the House.
Wow.
And the House was still controlled by Democrats, as was the Senate. So to try to pass a pro-life bill through a Democrat-controlled legislature was a fight. Mike Huckabee was the governor, and he was a tremendous ally on that. We had a rally in the Capitol that mobilized all the faith-based groups and all the pro-life groups, and had several thousand people show up. And through a lot of work and cooperation, we passed that bill. And now, which is probably the first of no telling how many dozens of pro-life bills that we've passed to make us one of the most pro-life states in Arkansas. So I take pride in that. There's a lot of lower taxes, less government interference, government efficiency
Yeah.
that I have pride in. But beginning that to push to save the unborn is probably what I would consider my greatest thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a tribute. And you're right. I'm sure that fight was probably incredibly difficult and stressful just because you were in the minority and it's so hard to get bills passed. So thank you. Thank you for taking that under and protecting babies. I do appreciate it. And there's so many of us that do appreciate that.
Thank you.
So let's switch real quick over and talk about space because this is the part that I'm super excited about. Um, you did something that so few people have ever done, right? So many little kids dream about doing. But you decided you had an opportunity recently to travel into space. So let's start with how did that even come about?
Yeah. It's kind of like my Air Force story. I kind of did it on a whim. I'd
Your
always
whims are
dreamed.
pretty amazing.
Yeah,
So,
I'd always dreamed of, as I said, being into space. I'm old
Mhm.
enough I can remember in 1969 when we sent Apollo 11 to the moon, and the drama that was involved. I remember coming in from the yard when they were getting ready to go and land on the lunar surface, and I don't think my mom and dad let me stay up late enough to I think it was 9 or 10 o'clock our time when he actually set foot on the moon. but I have such memories of standing out in our yard and seeing the moon and just being in awe that we were sending people to the moon. And again, I never in a million years had and I dreamed that or an idea that I would be able to do something like that. And I didn't do anything like that, but I did do something that I think was monumental for me. There's to your point, they tell us we are somewhere around. I was the 777th human being to ever pass the Kármán line, which is the boundary to space. And it's we'll talk more about the experience in a minute, but how I got about to doing it, it was, my boys had sent me some social media information about Blue Origin and I'd seen the hype about Captain Kirk going to space and Katy Perry
Mhm.
and I didn't know much about it except I thought I would do anything to be able to have an opportunity to go into space. So, you go on their website and it's like apply here. And so I put in an application and you tell them about yourself. And then if I thought it was a joke when a few months later I got an email requesting an interview and you go through an interview process um, and I don't know exactly what all they're looking at, but basically they ask you why you want to be an astronaut. They look at your background and then they decide, whether or not they're going to, offer you a slot or not. And so that process started about 9 or 10 months before I launched into, a couple months ago. So it's been about a year ago. And one of the reasons I feel so incredibly blessed by it is one of the ladies on our launch had been applying 4.5 years ago. She was accepted, but it took her that long to get
Wow.
a slot. So I'm not exactly sure how they rack and stack, except I gave them a good story. I told them that one of the reasons that this was important to me was, I flew the F-15 and I used to give my boys a hard time about pulling 9Gs and being higher and faster. And then my son went and flew the F-15, the newer version. And there was some dispute about who had been higher and faster. But then now he flies the F-22. And I told him, I said, my son has taken the title on both altitude and airspeed from me. I've got to get it back. And in
That's
fact, if you
awesome.
look at the video after I landed, they're interviewing me, and my son was watching, and he busted out laughing when he saw this. I said, "Well, son, Dad's got the title back. Good luck with that." So,
Oh,
I think that
that's awesome.
story was one of the reasons they may have allowed me to participate as quickly as I did.
That is fantastic. So tell me, before you tell me about the experience, tell me about the training. There had to be a ton of preparation that you went through to prepare for the experience. What is that like? What did you go through?
It's funny. The training is 3 days, so I wouldn't say it's a ton. It's nothing like
What?
yeah, it's nothing like the training that's involved in flying an aircraft or a jet aircraft or anything. And the reason is basically you're not flying, you're riding.
Okay.
And I always it really drives some people nuts when people call us astronauts, and I don't blame them. I don't think I'm any more of an astronaut than when I took somebody out of the back seat riding the F-15 is a fighter pilot. I understand that. I'm not doing what these guys are getting ready to take off and go orbit the moon are doing. What I am doing is getting an opportunity to see the world from a new perspective and feel what zero G and weightlessness feels like. But the training, and because of that, and my fighter pilot buddies gave me a hard time about how do you fly that thing? Where's the stick? And the fact is, there's one button, and I was privileged to be the one who got to have the button that was
Oh
basically
wow.
to do the flame suppressant. I said, "See,
Yeah.
I do have some control over this thing." But the training is about the basically how do you get out of the capsule quickly, but the biggest and the thing that I guess I kind of scoffed at, I'm like, why am I coming down there? I mean, I'm sitting in a seat, pulling a few G's and floating around. But the reason is I completely underestimated the complexity and the challenge when you're a zero G of getting in and out of your seat, strapping back in properly, not hurting yourself, floating around and doing things in the wrong sequence. So a lot of it was how do you get out of your seat and get back into your seat at zero G? Because if you do it wrong, you can hurt yourself. And if you're not back in your seat, which you have about 60 seconds to get back in your seat once they give you the warning,
Uh-huh.
you will experience 5.5 Gs and you'll hurt yourself if you're not in that seat. So that was the most important part of it.
Did you practice on what do they call that? The vomit comet, the airplane that did you practice the zero G's at all?
No,
Or okay.
no, you don't. There are. Uh, I'm not even sure they're doing that anymore. On this thread I'm at with a bunch of the people on it, they're doing it, I think, in Europe. But no, the only, I mean, I've experienced a lot of G's, obviously, in the F-15, and
Yeah.
I've experienced zero G, but not like this. And it's such a different experience. So no, for all of us, that was brand new, and it was a wild experience.
So tell me more about it. Like, tell me, kind of walk me through it.
Okay, so you start off early in the morning after the training.
Uh,
Uh, they load us up in uh, vehicles, and the people who've come to support us are out there, and it's kind of, they make a big parade thing out of it and take you out to the launch site while they go to the viewing stands. You go up the tower to get into the rocket. The day before, we go out and see the rocket, and we train. And they do have an actual capsule there with all the, like a simulator. So we do a lot of training in that. But you get up and you go up in the rocket. You get strapped in, and if all goes well, they start the countdown. Um, once, and they told us, once we get to, if you decide you chicken out or don't change your mind, you've got until 2 minutes. But once we get to 2 minutes on the countdown, it's in auto sequence and you're going. So just might as well strap in.
yeah.
Uh, so you strap in and you wait for the countdown. And in our case, the countdown started. And doing that, they're doing all the checks. They're checking the control surfaces and they're fueling the rocket and all of those things, and making sure the range is clear. And they had to pause the countdown for about 20 minutes for us because some people had gotten out into the area where the rocket's going to come down,
Oh,
and
wow.
they security had to go out and remove them. So
Yeah.
it seems like there's always something. But then they light the rocket, and you hear the countdown at 3, 2, 1. And I've got the best video of my grandkids screaming and hollering the countdown with
Oh, my
uh,
goodness.
watching it happen. But um, and they tell us that, you don't take off immediately. The rocket lights, and it takes 7 seconds before you actually leave the launch pad because it has to build up enough thrust to lift that
Hmm.
much weight into the air. And then while that's going on, it's incredibly loud. That rocket is 50 feet beneath you, and the roof of your capsule begins to glow orange. And I was sitting where I could see the tower. You could see the reflections of the flames coming off the tower.
Wow.
So all that's happening, and then you feel it begin to lift off and begin to accelerate and begin to climb. And what was a little bit unexpected for me was I was not expecting it to change its angle like it did as it
Hmm.
rotated into the wind, because it has to follow a very specific trajectory, and the winds at 30,000 feet or 100 miles an hour more than they are here. So that thing, the fins are automatically changing that. And as it does, your
Wow.
rocket is moving and tilting. It also begins to rotate this direction, so that it gives it some stability. So
Uh,
that rotation begins and you begin to accelerate. Excuse me. The acceleration, they asked me, many people have asked me, how's that compare with acceleration out of an F
exactly.
15? And what I tell them is, and we always used to take pride in this, an F 15 will climb faster to 50,000 feet than a Saturn V rocket will. And sure enough, I mean, the climb out is not as fast accelerating to 50,000 feet as a fighter jet is, but
Hmm.
the difference is at 50,000 feet, a fighter's done. You're coming down because there's no air and
Yeah.
engines need air. This thing gets its second wind at 50,000 feet, and it just sets you back in your seat at about 2.5 Gs and accelerates up onto about 2,500 miles an hour.
Oh,
So the,
wow.
ex- so the acceleration from 50 to 350,000 feet is, I've never experienced anything like it. It's just
So that was
tremendous.
surprising to you. I mean, I would imagine, like, if you're going up the first 50,000 feet, you're probably like, okay, this, like, I got this. And then that
Yeah.
next, probably put a little, open those
Yeah.
eyes a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is cool,
Yeah.
but I've climbed out faster than this before. But then you get to 50,000 feet and you begin to see the curvature of the earth and the darkness
Wow.
of space. And it just keeps going faster and faster. You go through supersonic, then you go through Mach 2, and it just continues to accelerate. Then the next phase in the flight is, and this is part of the training that they do prepare us for, is the stage. There's like two or three things you have to be prepared for. And Capcom, the communication person, is talking to us through this, and we can hear them through the loudspeaker, tells us to stand by for Miko. which is main engine cutoff, because this thing, the rocket, the booster rocket is pushing this capsule right up to about 300,000 feet or so, and then it shuts off, and then the booster comes back down. You've probably seen the video, and it's going to land, and they're going to
Mhm.
reuse that booster. So now the capsule's by itself, but that main engine cutoff is the reason they tell you to stand by for it. Again, this is what I was not prepared for. It's a big boom, and the whole capsule shakes, and and it gets
Oh,
quiet all
wow.
of a sudden. So you have main engine cutoff, and then the next thing that happened is stand by for separation. They tell you to stand by for separate. Now the booster is going to disconnect from the capsule, and it's going to start falling, but the momentum continues to carry you up to 355,000 feet or so. So during that, when they say stand by for separation, you hear the booster disconnect, and again, a big shudder of the aircraft. The booster begins to fall. And what's amazing now is when they go, the next command they give us is start your GoPro and you can unstrap, because now we're basically in space and it's zero G. And
Wow.
so you have about 3 minutes is all that you have up in space in the above the Kármán line. And so what we did, and I've got the videos and all that, is you unhook in the right sequence and you float out of your seat. And it is truly remarkable. And one of the biggest surprises for me, and it makes sense, is, Mindy, if you've stood on your head or if you've been upside down, you know that
Yeah.
it's somewhat uncomfortable because the blood begins to run to your head and you don't want
Yeah.
to do that for very long. In space, because there's no gravity, you're upside down, but it feels just like you're right side up because the blood's not running to your head. So it's very comfortable to be upside down, as comfortable as it is to be right side up.
So cool.
So I spent at least half of my 3 minutes upside down looking through the window and taking pictures, and everybody was oohing and awing. And I mean, it's a little overwhelming because we saw the moon very clearly as we were getting above the Kármán line. And then it's just complete black up there. And you can see so clearly the roundness of the world. And, a lot of people say it's somewhat of a spiritual experience. And it is, because you look down and you go, everything that ever was and ever is in is right down there. And it's incredible to experience, and it's also, when you look at that, to me at least, it declares the wonder of creation, because it is just such an amazing view and an amazing experience to see.
That is incredible. Now, were you able to see stars? Like, was it just like a blanket of stars when you were up there, or
Not
was
not
it?
so much, yeah, not so
Okay.
much stars, because there was still the brightness of the atmosphere that we were right
Okay.
above. It was really just black, and the moon occasionally when you rotated right, and then the roundness of the world beneath you.
That's
And
incredible.
then about 30 seconds, they give you a 1 minute warning. They say 1 minute, and that means
Yeah.
you have 1 minute to be strapped back in your seat. It takes about 30 seconds normally. So we would begin to make our way back to our seat and pull ourselves in. And it's a strap system very similar to what we had in the fighter plane. So you strap in and you prepare for the descent.
Yeah.
And the descent is very physically tasking. I was surprised at how. In fact, one of the ladies in our crew really struggled with the. We had 5.5 Gs with no G suit for at least 30 seconds, which is a lot. I mean, I pulled 9 in the Air Force, but we had a G suit, and I was in better shape and all those things. But the reason you're pulling all those G's is you're coming through the atmosphere, and you're starting at zero, but then you begin to accelerate. We go up to almost Mach 3, 2,500 miles an hour, and then you begin to hit the air of the atmosphere, and it starts slowing you down. And that slowing down is pulling you into your seat and creating these G's, which if you don't prepare for them, they can make it where you pass out or it's hard to breathe or whatever. But you experience those G's as you're coming down. And then the next real thing is you hear stand by for drogue chute. And so one of the ladies, that we had 2 women on our crew, and one of the women had filled the spot of somebody who'd gotten sick. And she was an employee of Blue Origin, a doctorate in aerospace engineering. And she had designed the parachute system that was getting ready to slow the capsule down. So we're coming down at about 800 miles an hour, and it says prepare for drogue chute. And I said, Laura, I hope you did this right. Your chute's better work. And she said, it's going to be great. So you
Yep.
hear a big boom and the drogue chute comes out. And then it says stand by for main chutes. And there's another big boom. And then the three big chutes come out that lower the capsule back down. And you slow down then to, it's still a pretty hard hit when you hit the ground. It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
But you're back on West Texas desert. And it was quite an adventure.
That is incredible. And did you feel kind of like wobbly legged when you came out of the capsule? Like, did you have from either the anti gravity or the G forces that were on you? Did you feel like you were a little unstable, or was it like, no, that was great?
No, it was fine.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, we had one or two people who the G's said we had to wait a few minutes to let them kind of catch their wind.
Okay.
But we weren't at zero G nearly long enough really to lose our balance and all that stuff.
Uh,
But really, you just get on the ground and it's just. I mean, I don't know how to describe the emotion, but it's just like I can't believe that just happened.
that's incredible. I can't imagine. So I guess the obvious question was, it was worth it, right? It was worth the time and effort. And
It was. In fact, there's been I think New Shepard has taken up about 90 people and about 20 of them have been repeats.
oh,
And I don't know if you've heard, but New Shepard basically suspended the program for at least 2 years. Blue Origin did to start working on the space. NASA said you all hands on deck to get our
yeah.
man back to the moon. And that's another reason I feel real fortunate is they had people booked for, every month for the next 2 years, and all those people are going to have to wait for at least 2 years, if not be. So I was just, and we
So
didn't know
blessed.
that till the next day, but I'm
Yeah.
just so thankful I got to experience because my response was when I got down was, man, I would love to do that again.
Wow, that is so exciting. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know you went into a lot of detail, but I mean, it's super fascinating. And like you said, there's your number 777, so there aren't that many to who can explain that to us. So let's go on from here. So you've done some amazing things. I mean, obviously, your military career, your political career, you're a businessman, very successful, and then space travel. What's next for you? I mean, where do we go from here?
That's a good question. And there was a crew of six, and we were talking about that there around the fire pit that night. What other adventures do we want to try? I mean, I'll tell you what's next for me is I'm getting to the point in life where I love my business and my family, and I'm trying to stay active in my church and all of those things. But what's next for me is enjoying grandkids. But I will say, I'm looking for another adventure. I don't know what it may be. I'm thinking about skydiving. I haven't done that yet, so maybe I'll jump out of a plane. I don't know. I'll figure out
You could
something.
jump out from the edge of space, right? You could combine them. And
I would, yeah, I don't that's an adventure, all right. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time and just sharing your experiences with us. You have such a wealth of experience, and as I said, your family has just made such an impact on Arkansas. I'm delighted and honored to be able to speak with you and learn a little bit more about it today.
Well, thanks, Mindy. It was a pleasure visiting with you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Senator Colonel Jim Hendren. He is just a jack of all trades and successful at all of them. He has a successful business that he started with his dad. He's got a great military career, very impressive political career, and then, as he has described to us, traveled into space and was able to experience what it was like to be an astronaut in space. And so, really incredible. Check him out. Check out his business, but also check out his profile because I think you'll find a lot more stories about what he's done. It's pretty interesting. So I hope if you've enjoyed the program, please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next week in the arena.